Okay, it is now 2 minutes past. So, thanks everyone for joining us. I'm really pleased to introduce Claire Smale from Inspired to Learn, who's going to lead us through today's online learning session on the art of effective communication. So over to you, Claire.
Oh, thanks, Sarah. Morning, everybody. It's really nice to see you. Welcome from wherever you've just come from this morning, and disconnect from your morning and into the webinar today. You might like to say hello to Bob, who sat behind me on the chair. You can see is listening intently, or not, as the case may be, and is my partner in crime this morning. I'm based in Devizes in Wiltshire, so not a million miles away from some of you, and it's gorgeous here today, really bright and sunny. So thank you for coming when the sun's shining so lovely outside. And yeah, diving into the topic of difficult conversations. I've got some slides that I'm going to share, and you can have a copy of those afterwards when you log in and get all the various details for that. And whatever part of you is here today is very, very welcome. Before we just begin, I'm going to just start with some lovely phrases, actually, which I always really like doing at the beginning of sessions, which is, may we all be well, may we all be happy, may we all be healthy, and may we all live with ease. And in my world, we call that love and kindness practice. You may have come across it before. And it's something that's really going to underpin the topic today around difficult conversations. And I'll come back to that at the very, very end of the session, and give you some very interesting links where you can go off and find a little bit more about love and kindness practice and how that might support you in effective conversations. So let's have a look at the slides. And I'll just go to the beginning. So effective conversations, I think for all of us, this is a massive topic, isn't it? Me included, some people are difficult to get along with. Some people really challenge us, individuals, groups, teams, communities. And where conversations work well, then there's no drama. But the ones that we're really struggling with or anxious about, or we find ourselves caught up in a bit of a moment on the day as the conversation unfolds, can really get our heart racing, can really make me as well as others feel, quite anxious. And oh goodness, how am I going to handle this? What am I going to say? And then, of course, the next time you come across people like that adrenaline, that sort of anxiety around, oh gosh, last time I met them, this wasn't particularly easy. That all starts to kick in, and we can over worry and we can overthink our conversation. So what we thought we'd do today, when I was chatting with Sarah about this and thinking about the topic, there's all sorts of different directions we could go with it. So we're going down the line of introducing a little bit of NLP to you. So Neurolinguistic Programming, giving you a really nice little taster of that and how it might support you as a framework, if you like, as a different way of practicing, a different way of being when you're having to engage or getting ready to engage with difficult conversations. So a tiny little bit about me before we begin. So my first career was teaching. So a bit like you, communities, young people, families, important parts of my prior working life and value set, and something that I carry now into my coaching work and my training work. So still spending a lot of time in schools, a lot of time in the NHS, working with practitioners in that area in general as a coach and as a trainer. I'm really happy to be here today and all that you bring with you today in that area too. So I've been running my own business for about 20 years, 23 years now, and stumbled across NLP by accident, actually. Never heard of it before, so I'll give you a brief introduction as well. And I'm also going to offer you lots of ideas for further reading, some links that you can go and have a look at, and hopefully really whet your appetite to take this in all sorts of different directions at the end. So at the moment, I spend about 80% of my working week training coaches and supporting people to become professional coaches in all sorts of different sectors. And then the other 20% of my week delivering more sort of general training, and also a private coaching practice myself. So that's just a little bit about me, and you can see I love riding bikes. Good. So the broad themes for today then that we're going to touch on and bring NLP into are these 4 themes. So this is what Sarah and I were talking about, and trying to come up with a sexier title really today for today's workshop, which hopefully we did because you're all here, and you're all curious about what we're going to do. But having a think about why. So it's a gorgeous sunny Tuesday in April, busy working week for all of you, I'm sure. So why here? Why now? Why this webinar? Why this topic? That second question from the end, thinking into your communities, your forums, your partnerships, your stakeholder work, your day-to-day life, your day-to-day job. And what is it about difficult conversations that challenges you personally? And, it's different for all of us. What sorts of people come to mind when you think about that? And what would you like to get out of this session? And as you look at those questions and notice the thoughts that come to mind, please do use the chat box. Sarah's going to keep an eye on that for me and probably interrupt now and again with some questions and some feedback from everybody. And I'll do my best to flex today as well, and answer some questions and maybe head off in some different directions, depending on what you really want to get out of today too. So what do you want to have happen in the next hour? How can you be at your best to get the most out of the learning in the next hour? How can you use the chat box to share thoughts on your mind, questions that you've got? And then for me, how can I be at my best to engage back into that and support you as much as possible? Good. So we're going to use the breakout rooms definitely once, maybe a couple of times. Get you having a chat and sharing. All of that is completely confidential. Doesn't get added to the recording. So anything that comes up in terms of new content or questions or experiences, you've also got the breakout rooms to share some of what you might be noticing. So NLP, Neurolinguistic Programming, so goes right back to the early 70s, 1973 to be precise, when the first NLP book was written. Came out of the University of Santa Cruz in California, and 2 guys who were studying psychology at the time, Richard Bandler and John Grinder, students of psychotherapy and psychology, and they got really curious about human excellence. And what's emerged from the 1970s and their work on human excellence is this multi-billion-pound global industry called NLP. But actually what it is at its simplest is some approaches that anybody can use in life, some tools and techniques that anybody can use, whatever context you work in, socially, domestically, in your relationships, in order to support you to be effective in whatever way that means to you. And out of that has spawned a huge multi-billion-pound personal and professional development industry, which touches into therapy, it touches into counselling, into training, into coaching, into leadership and management, and relationships and conversations, which of course is our topic today. So it's all about the brain. And the wonderful thing about this is that neuroscience is now beginning to prove what the psychotherapists and the psychologists have always suspected since the early 70s, and how by using language in particular ways, and that when I say language, I mean the way we talk to ourselves, so the language you use in your own head, in your self-talk, as well as the language that actually comes out of your mouth and is listened to by others, the way that that influences us and them, and the way that our language supports us and others to be effective, to achieve what we want to have happen, and to perform and to be good at what we do and successful at what we do. Potentially in a manipulative way, which is where NLP can get a bad press. But actually, how do we use language to influence others around us positively? And that's what difficult conversations are about. We know we're going to have a conversation that could be tricky, could be very tricky, could be mildly tricky. But what we're wanting to do is to influence a positive outcome. And ethically, if that's for the win-win, then isn't that what we're doing in every day of our working lives anyway? For performance, for the benefit of others, for our teams, for our communities, for our organizations, and yes, of course, for ourselves as well too. And yes, sometimes we've got difficult messages to deliver. Sometimes we need to get through a conversation and find compromise and find ways forward. And we do that through our language. And the language that we use is what then programs what happens next. It programs how others behave, how we behave, how we think, how resilient we are, how resourceful we are, and how we learn. So, potentially really powerful stuff. But what I'm going to do is to strip it right back to basics and look at how we might use this in difficult conversations. So 3 definitions there of NLP. Robert Dilts, you'll find loads of books that he's written about NLP and invented all sorts of amazing coaching and personal development tools and techniques. Quite a lot in common with CBT, for example, cognitive behavioral therapy. And NLP and CBT often argue chicken and egg stuff. We invented this. No, we didn't. NLP invented this. No, you didn't. CBT invented this. So lots of crossover there. Human excellence. So Gillian, who wrote the little NLP pocketbook, which you can get on all the various bookstores, this definition that what makes effective conversations really effective, what makes difficult conversations less difficult, if not really effective, and what's the difference that makes the difference. So for the people that handle difficult conversations really well and just seem to do a great job with that, what do they do? How can we package that and teach that and do a bit of that ourselves? And NLP is just a bunch of tools and techniques to help us to model excellence. Okay, so thinking then about difficult conversations. In the world of NLP, these are called the 4 pillars, and they're the 4 things that underpin me, you, us, to be effective in any area of our life. So to be an effective parent, an effective manager, an effective leader, an effective practitioner, an effective chair of meetings, an effective firefighter, whatever it might be. This is the difference that makes the difference. And everything that exists in the world of NLP hangs on these 4 principles. So in difficult conversations, when you're preparing for them and thinking about them, do you know what you want to have happen? So it's that whole thing around starting with the end in mind. What's the outcome that you need and want from this conversation in order for it to be effective? What's the performance indicator that your stakeholders might need and want in order for it to be effective? What does the person that you're having this conversation with, what do they need and want? Does that match or mismatch what others need and want? And how much time are you taking to stop and prepare? Okay, in order for this conversation to be effective, this is the outcome. This is what I want to have happen. This is what we want to have happen. This is what's needed in the system to have happen. Sometimes that could be external needs, sometimes it's your own internal needs, and often, of course, it's a combination of both. And I know that I very rarely stop and get my notebook out and sit down and write that and prepare that. But very occasionally, if I'm feeling really backed into a corner and know that I've got to tackle something difficult, I absolutely will prepare a conversation before I have it. And there's loads and loads of amazing goal setting tools and techniques. And at the very least, smart actions, be specific. Can you measure the outcome that you're looking for so that you know whether a conversation has been as effective as you wanted it to be? Is that achievable? Is it realistic? And what's your deadline for having this by? And I'm sure, through work and everything else, you're familiar with smart actions and smart targets. So, nothing much in there probably. It's not rocket science, but notice it and use it perhaps a little bit more. Rapport is a really interesting one. So a conversation by its very nature means that somebody else is involved, and that might be a person or a team or a bunch of stakeholders or partner organizations. But what's the quality of your relationship with them like, or with that person like? And how are you working at the quality of that relationship to support your conversations? Because it's very difficult to disagree and be in conflict where rapport is strong and robust, and you've got that great sense of psychological safety and trust. It doesn't mean that you're not going to have points of debate. It doesn't mean that the conflict isn't going to exist, but it means that the conflict and the debate will be healthier and easier to find a way through and resolve. And in the world of NLP, we talk about rapport in two senses. We talk about, I like you. And in difficult conversations, we very often don't particularly like the person that we're about to have that conversation with. That's often the sort of big underpinning issue, sort of the elephant in the room, the unspoken. We don't have to like everybody, and we don't like everybody. And in a situation where on a personal level we're not keen on someone, that makes a difficult conversation even harder. So what's your responsibility in that situation? What's under your control in that situation is to work really hard at finding something about that person that you like. And in psychology, psychotherapy, coaching, we call that unconditional positive regard. And it's back to what I said to you at the beginning around, may we all be well, may we all be happy, may we always live with ease, and may we all be healthy. Because ultimately that's what we all want as human beings. And if we can prepare ourselves with that mindset of, I like you, I want you to be happy, I want you to be healthy, I want you to live with ease, that sometimes enables us to prepare to have a different type of difficult conversation and to find that bit of connection at the human level, that way in which we can like that person, even though there may be quite a bit that we don't like. And do you know what? That's okay. The other thing I'm going to talk about a little bit today with difficult conversations around rapport is, I am like you. And that's the pacing, that's the sort of matching and mirroring principles in a conversation. You may know a little bit about this already. So we'll come back to that later on. Sensory awareness. So let's move around the diagram to sensory awareness. You've got to notice stuff. And if you're not noticing, you're missing a whole bunch of information as you prepare for these conversations that you can't work with. If you're not noticing it, you can't work with it. And the problem is, if you're at all anxious, if you're at all concerned about a conversation, if you're overthinking it, if you're caught up in your head and you're thinking, what if this, what if that, what they're going to say, how am I going to respond? You become very focused on the nitty-gritty and you miss all the opportunities around the edges. You lose your peripheral vision and peripheral awareness. And that's where there's a whole other bunch of information in the system that if you were aware of it, you might be able to use it. And the more you're aware of, the more flexible you can be. So that leads us round to the last point. So are you noticing and aware of your goals? Are you noticing and aware of the quality of the relationship? Are you noticing and aware of what this person is like and not like, and your own feelings about them and the situation? And the more information you can gather through your thoughts and your feelings and the sounds and the pictures, the more flexible you can be. And the more flexible you can be, the more successful you're likely to be. So this underpins the whole, if you want to be good at something, if you want to be well prepared, if you want to set something up to succeed in the best way possible, these are the 4 underpinning principles from the world of NLP. So yeah, interesting. So I'm going to move on a little bit and we'll go into breakout rooms fairly soon. Got an eye on the time as well. So last principle before we go into breakout rooms, and this again is very much an NLP principle, is as a human being, we've got an operating system, we've got the human brain, and I'm going to draw upon the analogy of computers here, because we talk about programming, neurolinguistic programming, and of course, computers, they're these amazing programs, just like our brain. But these programs are all sat on an operating system. And in the world of technology, we've really only got two operating systems to choose from. We've got Apple and Microsoft. And then within that, we layer in our programs. So if I just show you the screen on my phone, you know, I've got the Apple operating system, iOS, and then within that, I've got a bunch of programs. And on my home screen, these are pretty much how I run my day-to-day life. And then if I scroll through my screens onto my third screen, you know, there are some other programs, some other apps in there that I use less frequently, but occasionally dip in and out of. And my screen photograph, you know, that's part of my programming. It's part of what I see. It's part of what I'm feeding into my neurology every day. And I'm sure you've all got screensavers and home screens that you're programming joy, love, family, pets, you know, whatever it is that supports you to be at your best through the pictures that you put into your brain on a daily basis. It's really powerful stuff. But what's happening in life, and this is happening right here, right now, is we're all having an event, we're all having an experience on the screen together today. And you've got an operating system that's running in the background, and that's your human brain. Some people will say there's no difference between the male and the female brain. Some people think there is, but basically we've got one, if not two, operating systems, and it's pretty much a given. On top of that, you have got programs running consistently and constantly in the way that you notice what's happening. So as I'm talking, as you're looking at the screen, as you're sat in the room and experiencing your surroundings and your temperature and other sounds going on in your environment, your brain is overloaded with information. It's being bombarded by about 132 billion bits of information per second. So it's overwhelmed. So it has to filter and say, right, what's important here? What do I need to pay attention to? And the more relaxed you are, the more awareness it can cope with. The more focused and adrenaline driven you are, the less it can cope with at the conscious level. Your brain at the unconscious level can cope with probably about 120 bits of information per second, according to a brilliant book called The Einstein Factor. But at the conscious level, 5 things is on average all you can track. It's called the magic number 7 plus or minus 2. So 5 at the lower end, 9 at the higher end, 7 in the middle. It's a bit of research by George Miller in 1956. So this stuff goes way back. So if you can only consciously track 5 to 9 things, and your brain is probably only absorbing about 120 things per second, this is what's going on all the time. You're distorting, generalizing, and deleting information. And the trouble is when you go into a conversation with another person, they're doing the same thing. And you think you all know what you're talking about and what this conversation is about, but actually you're coming at it from completely different points of view, depending on how your brain is doing it and how their brain is doing it. So you might have a broad topic, but your sense of that is different. And most of the time that doesn't matter too much. But if there's any breakdown in understanding or trust or safety or conflict, this begins to become a problem. So what we do in NLP terms is look at this idea in difficult conversations of, right, I'm preparing for a conversation. The only thing under my control is me. What am I not noticing? What am I not realizing? What information am I missing? If I can put it back, I can support the conversation better. And how might the other person or people be coming to this conversation? And what might be their agendas and their perception? And how can I support that? Because that's the only thing that's under my control here. So let's just give you another example. So here's a map. I live in Devizes, right in the middle of this map. This is from a road atlas, and it gives us some information about the environment. There's an awful lot of information missing here. We can't see the landscape, you can't see where my house is, you can't see much at all. But what we can do is gather more and more information to help us prepare and to help us familiarize ourselves with something. And we ask questions, don't we? We interrogate it, we get curious. And you can do the same with a conversation. In your preparation, what else might be going on? What else might be in this landscape? And as we dive down into the detail, we start to uncover a little bit more. Go, okay, now this is beginning to make a bit more sense, and I can plan a bit better for how I engage, for what route I take through this. I used to be a geography teacher, can you tell? And then if we go down into the 1 to 25,000 on the map, I could actually pick out on here my house and show you exactly where I live. And then I'm going to get curious and think, oh, now I've got a better understanding of this town in Devizes in the middle of Wiltshire that I've never heard of before. This Cane Hill Locks thing on the left-hand side, what's all that about? That's interesting. And we could dive down into more and more and more and go, Cane Hill Locks? Wow. So we're uncovering, if I just go back, we're uncovering what's been distorted and deleted and generalized. And the more we interrogate it, the more curious we become in service of being at our best and in service of supporting our perception of this could be a difficult conversation. The more choices that we have to hone in on things or look at the wider landscape in more detail and take different routes through it, different options through it. And then thinking about how can we prepare the other person or people that we're going to be talking to and meeting with to do the same. What assumptions am I making? What assumptions are they making? And then literally in a second or two, Helen, I'm just going to ask you to get the breakout rooms ready. And we're going to go in and have a think about everything that I've said so far. So here's the NLP communication model. Before we do that, we have an event, which is this difficult conversation moment, potentially, that's coming up. Your brain is filtering that moment. It hasn't got a perfect sense of what it is going to be. You're making lots of predictions, lots of assumptions, lots of generalizations, deletions, and distortions around that. You haven't got the perfect information. You've only got your map of it, and that's deeply flawed. It's not the truth. It's just your truth. And your map of what this conversation is or could be is based on all sorts of prior programming that you've got. We all have. We're all complex human beings. And because of all of this, we're all running separate programs compared to everybody else in our environment. And therefore, we all behave differently and react differently and talk differently and have different emotional responses. And what you think is going to be an easy conversation can sometimes bite us in the bum and turns out to be a nightmare. What we think is going to be a difficult conversation often pleasantly surprises us because the behavior of the other person or people, we can't predict that, we can't control that. So into your breakout rooms, and I'm going to give you 7 minutes and 30 seconds. You've got 4 questions there to take away, and I don't mind what you do with them. Just love you to have an interesting chat with whoever you're with in the breakout room. So Helen will get all of that organised in the background. Right, welcome back everyone. You're welcome to keep your cameras on if you prefer, or just pop them off. Make sure your microphones are off because that just then helps with background interference noise-wise. And before I forget, we're going to finish about 5 minutes before the end, and I'm going to hang around and just take questions for as long as you've got questions. I'm not in a rush to go off anywhere, so I'm going to hang around later But feel free to use the chat box, because if we get questions in there that we don't have time to answer, I can do an email response, a written response to them as well, and point you in the direction of reading or info, or anything you might be interested in, really. And also Helen is going to pop a poll on the screen about 10 minutes before the end. I'll carry on talking, but it's just a short evaluation for the session. Lovely. So when you're preparing for effective conversations, one of the things that you can do, like with the maps, is you can dive down and down and down into more detail. But the trouble with that is it can become overwhelming. And it's also time consuming, isn't it? So gathering more and more information can be just as paralyzing sometimes. It can be too much and cause just the same amount of anxiety as not having enough information. And am I going to remember this? I'm going to remember to say that. What about this? What about that? So there's a lot to be said in a conversation for preparing, but not over preparing, because you don't want to overwhelm yourself in the other direction. So if we go back to this communication model, a good way to prepare is actually not to gather more and more information. And one of the ways to prepare for a conversation is to look at this list of things which cause us to filter our experiences differently. And how about if you prepared instead around things like values, beliefs, self-image, attitude, insecurities, decisions, and think about what's really going on for this person, that if I can work with it, it's below the surface, but it will actually have more impact. It'll create a better, a stronger connection on which we can position our disagreement, our conflict, our decision making, our debates, or position what I'm asking for, or discover what this person really needs and wants from me. What do they really value and believe in? How can we connect at the level of core values? So we can all agree in this community that children are important, that families are important, that making a difference, that cheesy phrase, making a difference is important. And that's around values and beliefs. So if you can connect at that level with the person that you're engaging in conversation with, that you're having a debate with, that you're making decisions with, rather than getting bogged down in the detail, it can really position and underpin the conversation in a much more sustainable and supportive way. And we call this the deep structure. So what's the deep structure in this conversation that often doesn't get spoken? You often get caught in a conversation in the nitty-gritty of the detail, and we call that the surface structure. And there's a lot of it. We can just gather data. And that's where the disagreement tends to be, oh, yes, but this, but what about that? But how about this? Oh, no, I think this. Or how about we meet at 3 o'clock next week? Oh, no, I can't do 3 o'clock next week. That's my non-working day. I can only do Thursdays and Fridays. Data can be overwhelming, but ultimately we all agree that we're doing this on behalf of our community, on behalf of making a difference, on behalf of the children that we work with, on behalf of the adults that we support, or whatever that language might be for you that you share in common. And that just makes the sort of day-to-day a bit easier, and the conflict a bit easier, a bit more understandable. Yes, we're both committed to finding a way forward with this. How can we compromise on the basis that actually deep down, this deep structure has meaning and importance, and we do want to get it right, and we do want to find the best way of moving forward. And therefore we behave differently in these conversations, because we're pinning them on a slightly different understanding than we had before. And we've got a better connection, a different type of rapport and agreement about who we each are in this, or who the team is in this, and what we share. So filtering, and you're doing it right here, right now, and it creates difference. We're all different, and it's okay to be different. If you've got any previous experience with psychometrics and behavioral profiling at work, it's all about, how we're different. We're different leaders. We're different in the way we engage with our projects. We're different in the way we engage with our conversations. So when I look at this list, I'm motivated by big picture. And I find conversations with people who are detailed focused really frustrating. They drive me mad. And guess what? My husband is a detail person and I'm not. And we run a business together, and it's a recipe for disasters on a bad day when we're both at our worst and we've both lost our flexibility and we're both feeling stressed because we drive each other mad. I'm motivated by moving towards something. I'm an optimist. I want to go over here because it's a great place to go. The future's looking bright. It's something I really want to achieve. Whereas my husband will move towards something, not because he wants to go towards it, but because he's being pushed away from something. Well, I thought, well, what's the point? Everything's okay. So he won't really take the step forward until it's not okay. So he needs the shove for the motivation, whereas I'll just go there because it's going to be better. And again, how we've ever stayed married for 33 years, I do wonder sometimes. But we get this in the workplace day in, day out, don't we? People drive us mad, and that's okay. That's normal. But if we both have the same connection, if we're both there for the same reasons, both wanting to achieve the same thing, ultimately, deep down, all these different ways of filtering our experiences, we can find agreement with, and we can find understanding and mutual respect for, to support the conversation. Some people love to go to the same place on holiday year after year after year, do their projects in the same way, hate change. Whereas other people are saying, I've done that like that for the last year. I want to do it in a different way this year. And I've thought someone else will say, well, it's broken. Why are we trying to fix something that's not broken? So, our motivations are different. And I just want to do it because it's possible. Whereas someone else will say we have to do it because we've been told we must. Possibility or necessity motivation. Following options or following procedures. Well, there's 10 different ways we could do this. Why don't we give them all a go? Or, oh no, we've always done it like this, and we always have a Gantt chart, and we always have a project plan, and these are the steps that we must all need to follow. So again, another point of conflict. So all of these are points of conflict with people who are least like you. And that makes conversations harder and potentially less effective. Are you proactive or reactive? A bit similar to awards way from possibility necessity. So what's under your control? The only thing under your control in a conversation is you and the quality of your preparation, the quality of how you manage yourself, your state management, your flexibility, the quality of the invitation that you present to join you in a conversation. How do you warm it up? How do you show that you understand all this difference? How do you acknowledge that they're not like you, but that you have this place to connect, even though you're very different and want different things? What do you share in common? How can you build psychological safety and trust and rapport with people who are least like you? And then noticing how you have less difficult conversations as a result, or the difficult conversations become slightly less difficult as a result, or you find it easier or quicker to compromise as a result. And that actually it's okay to be you at your best, and it's okay for this other person to be them at their best. You all want to be well, you all want to be happy, you all want to be healthy, you all want to live with ease at work. And that's what you all share in common. So it's back to these 4 pillars. What do you want out of this conversation? What does this other person or people or team or stakeholder, partner organization, what do they need and want out of this conversation? Where is the common touch point at which you agree as the starting place? That's the place of rapport. That's the place of I am like you, even though I'm not like you, because we're all different. But where can we find that connection? And sometimes it's harder with more people than others, some people than others. But you can find it. And it might be the place of values. This is making a difference is important. That's the bit that we share. Supporting others is important. That's the bit that we share. This common goal. That's where rapport sits and trust sits. Psychological safety is a brilliant topic for you to do more reading around. And that sits in a place of listening, actually, and being heard, being listened to. And that's something I just love doing the work around as well. So I'll just sort of throw that in as a nugget. None of this will be any good if you're not noticing. You've got to fine tune your sensory awareness. You've got to notice what's going on around you for people and their organizations so that you can connect with all of this and find out more and listen better and listen to the energy. This isn't just about listening with your ears. This is listening with your eyes, listening with your heart, with your guts, with your intuition. And all of that information gathering increases your flexibility. And if you can stay relaxed and if you can stay, what am I trying to say here? If you can, at the basic level of physiology, if you can control your breathing, if you can keep your heart rate low, your breathing rate relaxed, you'll have access to peripheral awareness. You won't go into sort of a hyper-focused, hyper-vigilant state. And you'll be much more aware of all of this in the system, and you'll respond differently as a result. You'll be able to draw upon your skills and experiences better as a result. So difficult conversations begin with managing yourself, first and foremost, knowing what you want to get out of it, how you're going to prepare, because the other person and their reaction is out of your control. But all you can do is your best in terms of preparing yourself and offering how you offer the invite to the other people or persons to engage with you. So you know that I'm a coach, so I'm going to finish with some coaching questions. Have a think about these as they run through your mind, and you might also notice the poll popping up in the next few minutes as well. But as a result of today, what could you stop doing? What could you start doing and do more of? And if you want to say yes to something new, what do you need to say no to? And, you know, we're all really busy people, aren't we? Your work is pressured, your email inbox is unrelenting, meetings and everything in between. You know, that we've got limited capacity for just adding more and more and more tools and techniques and knowledge. You know, in itself, coming to a webinar like this can be a stretch and it can be overwhelming. So in order to find the gap, to do the work, to do the learning and the growth and the development and put in some new ways of going about things, what do you need to say no to? So rapport, this is almost the last slide now. The quality of trust, the quality of connection, the quality of psychological safety to support your conversations. In the world of NLP, which is sort of the hook for today, rapport is I like you and I am like you. So finding that connection and communicating those two things. Filters is this idea of we all have a different map of the world, and that's normal and it's okay. My MBTI is an ENFJ. My husband's MBTI is an ISTJ. You know, we're on completely different ends of the personality spectrums. That doesn't mean we're not going to be successful in a business and a personal relationship together, because we can navigate this stuff when we're at our best. And we call that in NLP filters or meta programs. You know, and then finally, this idea of love and kindness practice. If you do nothing more than hold people in your mind, hold the team, hold the organization you're working with in your mind, and just think, may we all be well, may we all be happy, may we all be healthy, and may we all live with ease, how that supports you to engage in conversations as effectively as you possibly can. So a couple of links to love and kindness practice where you can listen to sort of a meditation or a mindfulness script to take you through some love and kindness practice. It sounds very fluffy, doesn't it? And ethereal and a bit new agey, maybe at its worst. But honestly, supporting people in the workplace is just the best thing ever. And to listen to one of these very short guided meditations for 2 or 3 minutes before you go into a difficult conversation, before you log into a Zoom call, and just say to yourself what I've said to you today. May we all be well, may we all be happy, may we all be healthy, and may we all live with ease. Notice the difference that makes. 4 really great book recommendations. So the cartoon book is a brilliant, quick, fun introduction to NLP, and it covers everything that I've covered today from the perspectives of cartoons and very little text. So it's a brilliant intro. And then you've got some deeper dive books there as well. And the good news is that they're all available on secondhand booksellers for £3-4, or you can buy yourself a shiny new copy. And all of them are really great reads, depending on what you're interested in finding out more about after today. So get in touch. I'd love to connect on LinkedIn. Genuinely email me with anything from today that you'd like to follow up on. And for those of you that might be thinking about doing some coach training or qualifying as a coach and have got that in the back of your mind, that's what we specialise in as a business, and we'd love to hear from you. So I'm going to stop the screen share and just invite you to turn your cameras on and your microphones, put your hand up, leave if you need to head off to the next thing in the day. Make sure you fill in the poll before you go, but I'm just going to hang around and take questions with Sarah and Helen's help.
There's a question here. If there is a power balance, they are more important than you. Their decision is final. This is where difficult conversations happen here. So more of a comment.
Yeah, well, not everything's under your control, is it?
Yeah,
And
that's for sure.
that is the reality. Yeah, so sometimes the only thing you can do is manage your state in that difficult conversation. You might not like the decision. You know that it is what it is. How do you want to face into that with a level of resilience and capability so that you still perform and you still remain at your best? And as coaches, that's the work we often do with people.
And there's a question about can the links that you gave in the PowerPoint be shared in the chat so that people can pick them up from there? And
yes, and they're active in the slide as well, so you're going to get the PowerPoint afterwards as a PDF, and they're active links in the PDF too. But I'll pop them in the chat in a minute so it gets saved.
Thanks very much, Claire.
Not a problem. What other questions have we got there?
A thank you from Stockton Parent Carer Forum. They've had to leave for the next. So quite a few thank yous. No other questions, but there has been a comment about some people found it incredibly difficult to talk through the 4 questions in the breakout room as a parent carer forum. So they're saying that forums have the most difficult job, as we're often parent carers ourselves, and representing the voices of those who don't always have confidence in their own voice. So it's so difficult not to be emotional when you feel the responsibility. And I guess this sounds as though they're talking about when they're in strategic meetings, perhaps, with local authority health officers. And they're saying we could probably do with a much longer session to explore this in a way that could give us a stronger next step for the situations we're in every day. And I just said that's really good feedback because it will help us to think about future sessions. So
I think that's a great comment, and there's so many tools and techniques to help you manage yourself in those types of situations so that you remain resourceful and resilient and don't come across as difficult to the other people, which can happen when you're very passionate. You really believe your values, your identity is so wrapped up in some of these things at work. It's really hard for that passion not to be seen by others as difficult, obstinate, obstructive.
And somebody is saying that they shake when they have to tell people they're wrong. What can they do?
So again, back to state management tools and techniques, personal development tools and techniques to help you cope in those types of situations and manage what you communicate to others. Because if you're shaking with passion or anger or just the energy and the vibrancy of what you're saying, you cannot not communicate, So even if your words are coming out one way, your physiology will impact your tone of voice, it will impact the energy, the resonance, and you might come across as incongruent, not believable. Even if your words are compliant, you might still be coming across as difficult. And that has an impact on others around you, doesn't it? And that then affects the next interaction. Yeah, so it's an absolute minefield. I've been in those situations. It's not easy. I've been on the receiving end. I've experienced it myself. I've caused problems because of expressing extreme passion or dislike or disbelief at a situation. It's hard.
I think that is definitely where my weak spot is. If I'm passionate about something, I'm just a bit like, like if I'm quite child-centered in how I'm thinking, and sometimes someone might have another idea, and then I'll just think like, no, but this is how it needs. But actually, sometimes, we are all different, and I think, what somebody thinks is that, that could be their right. I'm not just like being like sort of, I feel like sometimes we're full of self-righteousness, if we're honest, and we have to like check ourselves a bit. I know I'm just being honest,
Yeah, I get that completely. We've all been there, haven't we? Personal lives, professional lives, we've all been there. And it's when our core values, when our identity is challenged, it's back to this deep structure. It's the deep structure that's powerful. And it's around deep structure that is your greatest power for a conversation to be effective as well as difficult. So it can either be really effective or really difficult once you're working at that level. So you can use it to your advantage, or it can cause deep conflict.
Yeah, I suppose it's about being level-headed without allowing your own bias about a situation to sort of overtake it, isn't it?
Yes.
And sometimes I can foresee a situation playing out in front of me. I think that is, again, what I have struggled with is like, this is kind of the trajectory, how something is going, and you just want to sort of put a stop to it. I feel like a lot of people really struggle with that when you're working with people.
Yeah, thank you. I think that will resonate to people all around the call today, and people listening back to this recording as well. I'd really encourage you to work with a coach. There's plenty of access to free coaching through people who are doing their qualifications and need guinea pigs. Good executive coaches who are getting themselves qualified. If you've got any connections with the NHS, you might be able to get free coaching through their leadership academy. And it will give you that really well, and obviously pay for a coach if you want to, but I know budgets are tight, but it will give you that very personal one-to-one space to think about how you manage yourself and strategies to enable you to do that when you're under pressure. Because when you're under pressure and the mist comes down, that red mist comes down, it's so hard, isn't it, to pull back and be rational again. So my only tip to you is breathe. The key to it is breathe. Just breathe. Breathe in for 2 and out for 4 when you notice yourself in that situation. And that's like a sticking plaster. Bit of first aid for difficult meetings. Is there another question, Sarah?
No, that's all the questions. You'll be thrilled to know. So,
Gail, have you got one?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'd say the same in terms of managing, keeping ourselves calm. I can be very set back and be very circumspect and focused when I'm being a parent representative, when I'm representing families, when I'm going into strategic meetings. When it's affecting my lads, that's where Mama Bear comes out and the fight or flight and everything. And one of the things that's bouncing around in my head, because I have been exposed to lots of different things. So like when you're saying about the breathe, I'm thinking of the four corners of breathe, breathe, breathe. And I've got control, influence and acceptance. I've got previous CBT type that was familiar with, the positive regards. And what I'm finding, my thoughts on having done this, it's an interesting other, stop using your hands, Gail, another interesting tool in my toolkit. And one of the things that I need to take away and think about is how I'm going to bring this in the other things that we've been exposed to and are already familiar with. So thank you very much.
So you've got a toolkit there already. Yeah, brilliant. Makes sense. Thank you.
Does anyone else have any other questions that they want to ask or put in the chat? No?
If I just ask, actually, Claire, just wondering, you know, we go to quite a lot of meetings where there isn't really any progress. Trying to think of how to say this, yeah, diplomatically, where we've said the same things on a number of occasions, and nothing sort of moves forward. I'm just wondering if there's anything that we can be doing to, you know, maybe this is slightly outside the scope of the talk, but what can you do in that situation where you find you're having the same conversation over and over again?
Nothing, potentially.
Okay.
So it's always back to, if I was coaching you, I'd be asking you, and we'd be, you know, sitting down for a really good hour and thinking about what's under your control. What can you definitely do? So one of the things that's under your control is giving feedback. You
Yeah.
might not be able to influence the outcome, but you can offer that feedback. You can offer alternatives and solutions, but at the end of the day, you may not be able to control the meetings being any different.
Okay. Yeah.
Because you can't control whether or not people listen to you or take it on board always, can you? But even just giving the feedback might make you feel a little bit better. And you go, well, do you know what? I've done what I can do.
Right. Yeah.
So acceptance is under your control.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which might not be the outcome that you'd like, but it might be the only way forward in order for you to remain at your best and not be have your own sort of resilience and self-esteem or whatever it is sort of damaged.
Yeah, because it can be quite frustrating and feel like a waste of time. But yeah, maybe that just got to think of it in terms of
Your self-talk is under your control.
Yeah.
So if you're constantly, and I'm not saying you're doing this, don't get me wrong, Gail.
Yeah.
I've got a daughter who constantly says yesterday was a complete waste of time. She goes over and over and over, and it just becomes a bigger and bigger sort of problem. And it's gone. It is what it is, you know. Look at tomorrow and say, how can I be at my best tomorrow? Isn't that a better thing to be saying to yourself?
Yeah.
So that's just a very personal example of, you know, your self-talk is under your control.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, you need to get it off your chest, but when does it become a habit or a pattern that's not supporting you?
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
No, great questions. Thank you.
Anyone else got a question? Or have we reached the end? In that case, if there's no more questions, I would just like to thank everybody for taking part today, and also thank Claire for today's session. It's been really interesting, and some people have asked for more time on a session to think things through together. So I think we've got something to think about in terms of next steps. So thank you very much to everybody, but special thanks to Claire for guiding us through so well into what is a very complex topic. You've given us the broad brush strokes, which I think is brilliant, and some really
whetted your appetite, hopefully.
yeah, some really good techniques. So thank you very much, Claire. So we'll now end the session for everybody.